This computer good. Welcome everyone to today's session on remembering John Pierrakos. I feel very blessed to have with us today Dr. Pamela Chubbuck, psychologist, Core Energetic Therapist, Bioenergetic Therapist, Barbara Brennan Healer and Therapist, International Trainer, and all of those and many other things. Pamela, thanks so much for joining us today. Welcome.
Hey, hi, it's great to see you, and I'm happy to be here.
That's wonderful, thank you. So as you know, I mean, this year, 2021, would have been the centenary birth anniversary of John, and unfortunately, the 20-year death anniversary of his passing. He was close to all our hearts, but you kind of knew him from way back when. Can I just check in? How did you meet John, and how did this all unfold?
Well, the first time I ever knew about him, I was working with Alexander Lowen, actually, and I went up to New York to do a workshop. And at that time, John was the director of the Bioenergetic Institute. Yeah. So there were these rumors about John that he worked in this office and he had a blue wall, and he would stand people in front of the wall so that he could see their auras. So he was like a legend even then. And I went there and I saw his office, and the door was open a little bit, but I knew he wasn't there. So I tiptoed over and I opened the door and I looked in, and there was this blue wall. So that was the first thing I knew about him. And then the famous blue wall and the aura. And at that time, that was kind of it's still kind of mystical, but very mystical and kind of strange and weird that any psychotherapists were doing that sort of thing. And that fascinated me. The next time when I worked with John, when I actually met him as a person and an amazing therapist, was when a training program group went up to Phoenicia, and actually, I guess it was Phoenicia. And we worked with him for 2 days. And I was still very new and scared. I was terrified back then. And so he was asking for people to work, and I was watching the work. And I was not saying, hey, me, I want to work. And so at the end of the 2 days, there wasn't very much time left. And he said, okay, who wants to work? And then I said, okay, I'm ready. Yeah. So I raised my hand, but 2 of us said we're ready. And he said, well, I only have time for 1 of you to work. So you guys are going to have to fight to see who gets space. Yes. And this was a friend of mine. Her name was Barbara. And I said, oh, I can fight her. I can do this. So we wrestled around on the floor, and of course I won because I was bigger and I was really ready to do it at that point. Yeah. And so he gets me on the bed, of course, and says kick. First he had to look at my body. And I don't remember a lot about what happened, except this was a changing moment of my life, really. Mm-hmm. It's when he leaned over me, and I'm laying on the bed, and I had kicked. And what I saw in his eyes were the most loving eyes I ever saw. And I started to cry. And I thought, this man has more love than my mother ever showed me. And it was just like, whoa. So that was it. I was hooked. I was just feeling like I wanted to work with him more, and he could help me change and move my energy and whatever. So that was pretty amazing. So when he and Alexander Lowen
Separated.
so yeah, thank you. Separated, it was very clear to me that I wanted to work with John.
Yeah. So
Even though I stayed in connection with bioenergetics as well.
Yeah, I was listening to your interview with Jorge in, I think, 2014 it was, and you spoke a bit about that, and you spoke about so many wonderful things of those early days and working with John, and some of the spectacular scientific things you saw, the healer you saw in him, the amazing heart that you saw in him that you've introduced here. As you look back and take a scan of that, because you were with him and training and working with him for, north of 30 years, wasn't it? 32, 33 years, something like this.
Yes, all right.
Wow. And did you travel with him as well?
I didn't well, sometimes I traveled with him, but not so much. I went to New York, and he was doing workshops at Seven Oaks in Virginia, which is the Pathwork Center. And so I lived in Virginia. So every time he did that, I would be there and I would assist him. Mm-hmm. So that was a long time. And then sometimes when he traveled, I was with him in Colorado or here or there. Mm-hmm. I was one of the people that held up the sign that showed the energy and stuff like that. We had to stand there and hold it up. And he was very funny because I said, John, why don't you get slides and put this on the wall? And he's like, no, I'm going to do that. But it was such an honor to just watch him work and be there with him. And, back in those days, John was never very good at explaining what he did, but to watch him work, and you had to kind of figure out what he did.
Yeah.
Then he got a little better at that as time went on, but he was never very good at explaining it. He explained it pretty well in his one wonderful book, Core Energetics.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's the part I was drawn to ask you about, because, for John, he spoke about an evolutionary process, and he was evolving it and developing it as he went. I'm curious to hear, over such a long period of time, what are some of the things that you saw evolve, both in who he was, how he worked, and then how he structured and taught the work?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of funny. I'm going to think about this as I'm talking, probably, but it's kind of funny because at Seven Oaks, he would do this amazing workshop, mm-hmm. and then he would walk out the door at the end, and a lot of times it was with students. There would be students there. Mm-hmm. He would walk out the door and leave me to answer questions, and the questions were, how does he do that? What is he doing? What is he seeing? And I'm like, well, okay. Let me see. I have to figure this out. And I was kind of forced to have to really look inside or use my intuition and say, why is he doing this? What is he seeing? And how is he doing it? Mm-hmm. So I got to be actually pretty good at that. I think by necessity. Mm-hmm. And when I first watched John work, we were all, and I especially, was saying, how does he do that? How does he know these things, that it would take another therapist about 20 years to figure out? It's because he could see auras, and he could see chakras, and he had, begun to really understand what those things would mean. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I will never be able to do that. Mm-hmm. This is just a gift. But John taught everybody can do this. Everybody can see this. I think that might be a little stretch of imagination, but he would teach in class how to look at the energy field. Excuse me. And we wore these strange glasses that were like goggles that were blue.
Yes.
And you could look, and if you didn't think too much, you could begin to see an energy field around people. So back in the old days, we actually did that in class. I'm not sure if people are doing that now anymore, but
I don't know that it's in most of the curricula at the moment, to be honest with you, when I talk to the other directors around the world. But it's nice to see that that's what it evolved out of.
So I know that, as you're saying, the evolution of that particular thing, since I made it a point to really try to do that and was very interested in the subtle energy and worked with Barbara Brennan, who was a friend of mine back in the day, that I'm remembering taking a class of students from in Italy. And we were in the mountains, we were in the snow, and I would hike them up in the morning. Wasn't a huge mountain, but we would hike up early in the morning and stand at the top of the mountain where the sun was coming in, and I would teach them that they could see the mountain, the aura of the mountain as it, moved up and back and up and back. And a lot of the students could do that just by energy and by hiking a lot, by breathing a lot, by knowing how to let go of the mind. So I think that's something that I really liked doing and would love to do again. And I'm remembering that a few years ago at one conference, I can't remember which one now. I think it was I might have, I can't remember, but anyway, that people were also not learning how to use the pendulum anymore. And that was a big, important thing that I learned from John early on when he was just beginning to figure out what that stuff meant.
Yes.
And I was in a workshop with him in Phoenicia, and he was talking about it, and it was fascinating to me. And he, said if it does this, it'll mean this. If look at his book, and it'll tell you what it means. But and so we all kind of learned how to do that, and that was before Core Energetics actually existed. That was still in the early times before he came out with the words of Core Energetics.
Yes. So that actually is something that I've just been thinking about as you're speaking. With this approach that John, it feels like really broke out from him inside himself when he started teaching Core Energetics. How did that differ from what Al and the team over in the Bioenergetics trainings were doing? Because you were still training in bio at the time, weren't you? When John moved?
Maybe, yes, probably right in the beginning of that, but I finished training, and I was on one of the Connecticut board of directors for a while after I trained there. So I kept in touch with the Bioenergetics. So could you repeat that question? Or what was before that? Because I was thinking and then.
I just got to thinking about, you're describing how John was evolving that work and with the energy field more and with visualizing. In the other review, you spoke a lot about John's spiritual side. So I'm just wondering how what he was teaching and how he was teaching you was different to what had been taught and what you had been experiencing with the bioenergetics trainings.
Well, that's really interesting question because, of course, John was the co-creator of Bioenergetics.
Yeah.
So all of those things, the foundational things were similar. I found in Bioenergetics, they talked a lot more about the body and how that worked and why you were doing it. And I was happy to get that and still have that. The main differences are the spiritual piece, which Bioenergetics was not talking about, but I understand they are talking about it now.
That's wonderful.
And so that's really great. And the main thing is that the Pathwork lectures, and of course, John at that point was with Eva. So the Pathwork lectures and Bioenergetics combined created Core Energetics. But the main difference is that the use of the mask, lower self, higher self. And I work with people today. I work a lot with therapists. Mostly that's what I like to do. And they are just amazed with that concept. I mean, there's a concept, a lot of people have that kind of idea that there's different parts of us, but they don't know how to use it and why they're using it. And in Core Energetics, we're always working toward the spiritual, but we say, hey, you have to go through the pit of snakes before you can get really conscious and get to the higher self. There's another piece here that you asked me before, how am I evolving the work? And quite a number of years ago, I added something to the mask higher self, lower self. Because after many years of working, it became so clear to me that there was another piece. It's really a part of the lower self. And I call it the saboteur. And I just see that people use their negativity to really sabotage themselves. And when they can name that and act it out, just like we do with the 3 chairs or the 3 places, now we have a 4th one. And people will talk about how they sabotage their life from the voice of this really mean, horrible place. I also explain how that comes into being. And if you look at it from the psychological or you look at it from the spiritual. So you have the higher self, which is the divine possibilities and the expanded consciousness. And you look at the saboteur or the low, it's really the lower self saboteur as the demonic. And it's just a part of the demonic, but it works against yourself. So it knows all your secrets and it tells you, it's talking in your mind all the time, like you are a horrible person and you'll never do it. And it's my job to keep you from expanding.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty important part that really helps people that I've been using. And I taught it. I don't think they're teaching it now in New York, but they used to when I was there. So we'll
wonderful.
see.
Yeah, and this is the exciting part for me because we spoke about John and his evolutionary process, and of course, so many of you seniors, and then many of you have taught multiple generations since then who are evolving the work even further, defining it more, getting more depth and clarity. It's a pretty full body of work, but it's wonderful to see the richness that's coming out with the work and research going on around the world. And it's a great example there that you're sharing. I mean, that just adds a nuance to it that makes it so much clearer, as you say it.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with the evolution, and I love seeing the younger people that are maybe only 60, 50.
Those whippersnappers.
But I remember when the group of us directors got together in Berlin after John died, and it was the first time getting together. And the history shows that when the director and the person who's created the stuff dies, everything goes into chaos, and we certainly did that. And we all got together in Berlin and talked about that, and worked on that, and talked about the evolution. And I said at that time, so clearly, that it's an evolutionary process, and we are evolving, and the process has to evolve. So we're not going to be stuck, even though wonderful. Core energetics needs to continue to evolve. And one of the things I really felt was looking, and I think we still need to work with this, is that, and we are, and is that core energetics has been attracting middle-class white people. And I said, hey, core energetics is white bread, and we have to do something about that. So it looks like we're doing it. It's a slow thing. Partly is because it's very expensive to do the training and to do all the therapy and supervision that takes. So we're trying to work with that.
Yeah. And look, I mean, it's different in different parts of the world as well. As I'm here in Australia and through Asia, and I work extensively through there. But through Europe and in the other Americas, there's a bit more diversity coming through that I'm seeing, which is quite amazing.
That's
beautiful.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
We need all the help we can get.
Well, I mean, it's wonderful to see just the difference and the perspectives and the nuances that diversity brings us, and I know certainly John was a bit old school in some ways, particularly, when he's talking about gender and homosexuality and stuff. I remember I guess by the time I met him, he was quite a lot, it was near the end, and he was quite timid from what I've heard from many of you. He was joking about things with me that perhaps might have, in his younger days, led to a thump in the chest or a thump on the head or something, so I consider myself lucky.
Yeah, well, there is a little story about that. I don't know if you'd want to use it, but I would when I was in New York and I was teaching, and we had the core energetic programs were going, and I would go there and spend a bunch of days, some teaching and some just doing therapy, because there weren't core energetic therapists around yet. Around the country, or very many around the world. So a couple of us would go early and spend a couple of days just doing therapy with clients so they could feel it, right? Which is why I made my videotapes of Say Yes to Life videotapes, because people would say, I never went to an exercise class. I don't know what you're talking about, or I don't know what grounding I don't know what grounding exercises are. And this might be a second year student in core energetics. And I went, oh, geez, I have to do this. So anyway, that's why I did that.
Yeah.
But all right, now I lost my train of thought since I went off on that little tangent.
I'm sorry. I like to encourage you to wander around a bit like that. I'm kind of with that. I think many of our viewers would love to hear some of these musings that you're sharing with us.
Oh, okay. So now I remember. It's amusing. Yes. So I would go to. It's how I always work anyway. I work in circle mind. I go around like that. Some people that drives them crazy. But
no, I'm right there with you. I'm kind of wandering in and out of circles, and I'm trying to get onto the one you're on. So.
Yeah, so we were talking about gender and all that, and so that reminded me of going in and doing this work. And then if I was not teaching at that time, and John was there and he was teaching, I would go and be with him. So that was the other thing. I would be there. Yeah. And at one point, John said, "Why are you doing this? You don't have to be here." And I said, "Because I want to be with you, John." He said, "Yeah, but you know all this stuff already." And I said, "Yeah, but every time you teach it, it's different You add something, you're evolving. I want to see what you're doing, and I love being with you.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I felt that he needed some input about, some challenge about, is that he was always talking about male and female sexuality.
Yeah.
And in one of the classes, he was doing that, and there was actually somebody in the class who was homosexual.
Yeah.
And he should have known that. He probably did know that, but he didn't acknowledge it or talk about it.
Yeah.
So John and I sometimes went to dinner after these classes or groups, and we did go to dinner, and I talked to him about this. I said, John, you've got to change this. This is not okay.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, blah, 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 blah. You know, John was an older Greek man. And you didn't talk about that. He didn't grow up with that. It was all the sexuality that he knew, and then the Reiki and stuff that he did when he came to New York. So I was trying to talk to him about evolving that.
Yeah.
And what I finally said to him is, John, you think everything is about love? He said, yes. And I said, so love is love. Human beings can love each other, and isn't that okay? And he's like, sat back in his chair and said, yeah. Yes, I'm getting it finally. We also the faculty that was meeting, that the only faculty that existed in New York, met in Phoenicia once a year, and we had some meetings about the work and whatever, but we also had ouzo and dancing and
Wonderful.
having fun.
Yeah. Did he smash
But during the meeting, what?
Did he smash any plates?
Smash any plates? No, but he danced. That was great. And he always poured the ouzo.
Yeah.
And I was always like, like that. But during one of those meetings, the faculty that existed then confronted him on that whole the issue of gender and sexuality. And he did change how he talked about it. He did make that more open, but I don't know that he ever actually changed his mind. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, that was what happened with that particular thing.
Wonderful, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that, because this is a common conversation, and this is the first time I've had that sort of insight on it. So it's really wonderful. One thing I am also drawn to ask you about is Eva. Did you get much of a chance to spend time with Eva and John together?
Actually, not much. Eva was there when I would go to Phoenicia, and after I saw John work and we met, I would go to every thing that he did that was open to professionals, or that was all professionals. And that would be twice a year. So it was like a Memorial Day weekend, we had 3 days, and Labor Day weekend, we had 3 days. And I would be there. So I was with him. And Eva would be around. And she was also, a bit of a legend already. And so I could see her walking around, and she would be having sessions with people in these little houses, cottages around, and we would be in the big barn yelling and screaming and running around. And I always felt her as this warm and open person. I would see her at dinner, but I didn't really know her. I mean, we spoke, but I didn't really know her. Other people knew her a lot better than I did.
Yeah.
But I heard John talk about her, and he, I remember one time we were sitting outside the barn. It was a beautiful day, and we were having part of the class outside, and the sun was shining, and John was talking about sexuality. And he was talking about how beautiful it was and how expansive it was. And he was talking about, the woman's vagina opening and being welcoming. And I was sitting there going, wow, this is so beautiful. And I had had a divorce from a man I didn't like, and we never had anything like that. So I was like, oh, is that ever going to be happening with me? This is amazing. But yeah, he was wonderful talking about it. And then when I would see him in other places, he would sometimes talk about Eva after she died, and I would be with him. We might be walking down the street in New York or having a little dinner after a group. And he would say how much he missed her, and he would talk about how being lonely, and I felt so much heart in that, and sadness. And, for myself, I could feel him. But I also knew that he was in communication with Eva. And he talked about being in communication with her. He would ask her questions and she would answer. That was very sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have much to do with John's previous family?
Did I?
Yeah.
Yeah. I only met Magdalena on a few occasions. The first Core Energetic conference we had in Greece, she was there, so I got to know her a bit. Wow. But not really. John's actually the very first time that I worked with John was, I said it was Phoenicia, but it was in Massachusetts, and a couple of friends of mine who were in training had heard about John, and we knew we wanted to go. So we hopped in the truck and drove from DC to Massachusetts to see this legend. And it was, oops, sorry, my husband's coming in the back there. He's crawling on the floor to get the dog. It's okay. He can cut this part out. Don't worry.
No. I actually just want to let him know that she's just been saying what an amazing man you are, and she's so happy she met you, and you've awoken things in her that she was only dreaming of when John was telling her about it. So.
And she knows where to deposit the check, right?
Yeah,
to you.
Take some creative license, but I figured I can.
Oh, thank you. Nice meeting you. I'm doing dog duty.
Thank you for getting him. So anyway, we ended up, we drove around New York because I was with a friend who could feel the energy of New York City, and she was very very conscious of energy. So we were having a great time singing and stuff around in this car, getting to this place. We didn't know where we were. It was dark. Some conference center in the middle of the woods. So I wake up in the morning and I go to the workshop, and with the circle of 26 people, with John here and me here and all the other people. And I don't remember very much of what happened here except what was happening for me. which I was totally terrified. At that point of my life, I was really scared, and I didn't know myself very well. So as people talked around the circle, and I was like maybe 2 or 3 people away from John, I got more scared. And when it was getting close to me and my heart was going, I could probably see my clothes moving. And all I could say was, I'm scared, when it was my turn. I don't remember what else I said, but I said, I'm scared. And then it went on to the next and to the next, and I don't remember them. But I do remember precisely what happened when John was his turn. And he looked directly at me and he said, I'm scared too.
Beautiful.
And I just was like, oh, if this man, psychiatrist, someone who's worldly, someone who's been doing this for 30 or 40 years or whatever it was at that time, can be scared, that gives me permission to be scared. And he went on to say that he was in the middle of a divorce. So this was very early. And that he was in the middle of changing his life, and that he didn't know exactly what he was going to do. And that was before Core Energetics existed.
Yes.
And it was so real and so wonderful that this man could say this. I just breathed a sigh of relief. And the part of why I followed John is because he could be so real, like in sessions. And I would go from Virginia at the time to New York. So that would take me all day to do a session with him. I would get on a train or a plane, go there, get in a taxi, go there, have a session, turn around and come back. But it was so worth it to do that. Anyway, that was
that was what you got of John's life prior to Eva. Terrific. So Pam, I in the messages below on the YouTube channel, I'm going to embed your interview with Jorge, because there's so many beautiful things there that I think the listeners will want to listen to, as well as some other notes from your website, because I think it's awesome that they're able to look at and refer to some of the things you're talking about. And I want to say thanks so much. This is exactly what I was after, a conversation where we could just shoot the breeze and talk about John and whatever you're feeling into, whatever you're tuning into would present. And I feel him here. I feel him over your shoulder, chatting away with you and, participating in this discussion.
Yes. Thank you so much. Sometimes I'm working and I just feel him in the room with me. And sometimes I'm working and I go, I don't know what to do, John. What would you do? And then I hear something or feel something. So probably the most wonderful thing that anybody ever said to me, well, 2 people, Ilsa from Mexico, when I was working there, after she watched me work, she said, you work more like John than anybody I've seen.
Oh, wonderful.
And I was, amazed about that, but how long I've taken to actually, I worked with him for 10 years as he was my personal therapist. Sometimes it would be 2 hours. If I could get 2 hours in New York instead of 1, it was amazing, because so many people wanted him. That. Oh, the other interesting thing is 2 years I spent working with him in Phoenicia before Core Energetics, and I wanted to work with him personally, and it just didn't happen. You had to apply to work with John. You he made a decision of who he would work with or not.
Mm.
So after, one time in Phoenicia, I said to him, John, I really want to work with you. And he said, call my secretary and tell her to give you an appointment. And that's how it happened. And then I worked with him for 10 years. Personally. Yeah. Thank you so much for being and doing this, Ranil. It's wonderful. I can't wait to see what's going to happen with it.
Yeah, look, it's so much a great pleasure for me. This has been on my mind for so long. And I actually just wanted to say thank you, Pam, for sharing who you are in this conversation, because I felt into that, and I felt very privileged that you've allowed me in to experience that, not just in the conversation, but those circles you spoke about. I very much felt a part of that. And that's a beautiful experience. So, I'm looking forward to chatting more with you. Let me get a little bit of these interviews out of our way and under our belt. And then I'm going to come back and we're going to explore some of these topics and maybe a few others and share your experiences there, if that's okay.
That would be wonderful. I'd be very happy to do that.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day, and we'll catch up soon.
Yeah. Feel you.
Thank you, and you.